So many of us business owners struggle with lead generation, managing sales, staying on top of the newest marketing strategies, and there's a billion of them out there. And not to mention, too, running day-to-day operations is tough trying to figure it all out. And as a result of that, you probably are not growing your business effectively. And today, this is why I have the guest today on. His name is Ken Cook. He's the founder of the Prepared Group, a marketing agency, consulting firm, all the things for agencies or for businesses in general. When it comes to marketing, Ken does it. And he's been not only doing it for a number of years, but he grew from just himself to this boss of a team, I'll dare say, helping these small businesses grow. Welcome, my good buddy, Cowboy Ken, as I call him. What's up, brother?
Much. How y'all doing today?
Living the dream. The first thing I want to start out with is the common mistakes where small business owners are not paying attention to when it comes to marketing, especially when it comes to their own. Many of us have tried different agencies. We've done all these things. Help us reset the picture. How can we look at marketing from a more simple viewpoint that'll still allow us to scale?
So here's the big challenge that exists. What small businesses are told is that their problem is not what their actual problem. And so what happens is they invest in the wrong places, right? I'll create a quick analogy. You and I both have a bit of a fighting background. Imagine that you're training to fight a guy who you've been told is a great wrestler, right? And actually he's not. He's a terrible wrestler, but he's an Olympic judoist.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got all the throws, right? And he can flip you and move you and adjust you from however he wants. But you've not been working on any of that defense. What's going to happen? You're going to picked apart over and over and over. And so in the same way, small business owners are being told, and implicitly and explicitly, there's really two main areas, one main area that you need to focus on. And it's digital. Right? You got to be on Google. You got to get your SEO. You got to get your Facebook ads. You got to get this. You got to get that. Right? And there's a really narrow range of things that small business owners are instructed on. Well, this is the standard for marketing. Google ads, SEO, Facebook ads are kind of the three big ones. Here's the problem. Those may or may not be right for you.
Mm-hmm.
And unless there is a good strategic reason to invest in them, there's a high likelihood that the advertising dollars put in those channels is misplaced. When I say this to people, what they automatically ask me next is, well, what's the right channel then? And the right channel is not the obvious, it's not the right question. The right question is, where can you garner the attention from your right customer? Right? Like, really think about this. Where is your customer willing to interact? Where are they willing to be influenced? What do they need to be influenced by? Those are the questions that I think have to be answered before we ask the tactical questions of what should my ad campaign look like, etc. And I've started even going a little bit further than that and saying, for most small businesses, not all, right? I've owned a business that did $1 million a year completely off of Facebook ads. Zero referral, etc., right? Completely off Facebook ads. But the vast majority, especially of local small businesses, I would say digital advertising can only account for 10 to 20% of their overall customer base. And so if we're then asking the question, how do I grow my customer base? Well, I've got one tool here that's going to affect 10 to 20% of it. What are the other ways that my customer base can be affected? That's what we have to look at to really grow a company and scale it effectively. The scary thing in all that is very little of that is go hire a marketing agency and tell them to go do good work.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a really good friend. His name is Josh. Josh is an executive in a multi-nine-figure organization. And before that, he ran a RevOps firm focusing on the sales side of RevOps primarily. And one of the things that he said to me was, Ken, I know a lot of marketers and a lot of marketing agencies, and I'm constantly, if not universally, disappointed by every single one of them. I think the here is that most marketing agencies aren't solving the right problem, and therefore they're not getting an actual return for the business.
So when we talk about like marketing agencies are looking at things wrong, it sounds like, and also, but by the way, what you're saying, I was kind of shocked as I was like sitting here listening. I'm like, what do you mean digital marketing isn't the right move? But you're right. There's so many variations of businesses, right? I just happen to come from a place where it's all digital, right? I make content, content generates leads. There's other things that I could be doing, right? Going to in-person events and networking and all that fun stuff. But every business is definitely different. But when marketing agencies come in, what is the right way to look at this, right? Like to me, marketing agency's purpose would be to bring in qualified leads. Now we go into sales, it separates out, right? So kind of, am I looking at the problem that marketing agencies solve the right way, or is there another way to look at it?
I think you are, but I don't think that the vast majority of small businesses have lead problems.
Mm.
They have sales and marketing operations problems.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Somebody that you and I both know, Clayton Mask, I interviewed him maybe 5 years ago. And he said something to me. It was like a little one-off interview for a summit that nobody ever watched. Okay? And he said this, and I don't know if he said it elsewhere. I've not heard it from him elsewhere, but it's one of those moments that I was like, oh, I get it. So what he said, the big issue is this, is most people get a pile of leads, let's say 10 leads, and they effectively follow up with 1 out of those 10. And so they'll close 1 out of 10 leads. And if you look at national averages, 8 to 15% of people who are inquiring about a product buy. So he's pretty spot on. Well, what does the small business owner do once that one person is bought? They go buy another 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ask this question regularly, thanks to Clay. Well, what about the other 9? Is it more effective for my business to say, well, if I can just buy another 10 cheaper, or is it more effective to say, is there a way that I can extract a second, third, and fourth sale from those batch of 10? And what we've found over the last 6 or 7 years in doubling about 250 small businesses is that it's a heck of a lot more effective to sell and manage the sales process of those 10 than buying another batch. Is the average marketing agency isn't set up to do that. The way that they make money is by running Facebook ads.
Mm-hmm.
Well, really think about this with me. If you make money running Facebook ads, do you have an incentive to say running Facebook ads may not be the best thing for you? Right? And so I think the problem is the average marketer isn't incentivized to get to the answer, what is the best way to grow this business? As much as the average marketing agency is not a marketer, but rather they are a marketing technologist. They know how to use the software. They know how to use the tool, right? They know how to do the SEO. They know how to work the marketing automation platform, but they don't know anything about structurally growing a business. And I think that's the problem. And I don't mean to throw a lot of shade at wide swaths of marketers.
No, we should.
But for since 2020, we've run a company training marketing agencies. I've trained agencies on 4 continents. I've spoken with literally thousands of agencies, and I've presented to even more than that. And I can tell you universally, I would not be shocked if we were to study this out and get to exact numbers, and the number were to be 90 or 95% of marketing agencies are just technologists. And they don't know how to do strategy, they don't know how to think strategically, and they don't know how to actually grow a business. What they do know how to do is run an ad campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things are not the same thing. And if I could, I'd love to tell you a really personal story about this, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so it was 2016. I'm 4 years or so into running my own agency, and I believe my own hype, okay? And I tell people I'm the best ads guy you've ever met. And in many ways, I was very, very good. We got a contract with this local pest control company. Ed Belding was the owner's name. And Ed said to me when he hired me, I've never kept a marketer more than 3 months because they just don't know how to perform. And I said, Ed, I'll be the last marketer you ever need to hire. Over the course of 18 months, I took Ed's business from doing about $350,000 a year to close to $900,000 in 18 months. In other words, we're very good at running ads. It's pest control in Oregon, so it's a seasonal business. And so we kind of take November, December off. And so we shut everything down in November. I come back in January, and I'm expecting that this guy who just bought a brand new house, has a brand new office, brand new wrap truck, etc., is going to be giving me a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, I go and walk into his brand new office that is not even fully set up yet, and he unceremoniously fires us. And I'm walking out of his office dumbfounded, right? I tripled this business in 18 months, and you fire me for it? But this is what he said. He said, Ken, you've done a great job of building me a great front door. Problem is that's all you're doing, and you've built an equally large back door.
Hmm.
And he was right. Here's the thing. He was so right. We never gave a second thought about churn rate or client retention or sales process or whether we were overselling their team. We were just running ads, and I knew that it cost $54 and change to acquire a customer, that over their first year they would make a net of about $50. We had it down to a science. We knew the numbers, but we didn't know and didn't care about. And what I see from so many other agency owners is they don't care about. Are we growing the net profitability? Are we helping them retain clients? And are we actually building a marketing system that is sustainable?
Mm-hmm. You outworked yourself out of a job, is what you did.
It's not even that. It's that we weren't a complete solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were a good technologist. And that moment inspired me to say, I can't just be a technologist. I actually have to understand, how do you grow business? Right? And growing business might be gross profit, but it might be net profit, or it might be EBITDA. It might be some other factor other than just more clients, more leads, more gross revenue. Right? Because those things, like gross revenue is important. Like, I don't want to downplay that. But if I'm talking about the difference between growing gross and growing net, there's no comparison between the two. That's what your average marketer, in my experience, does not understand. And I think that's the challenge.
Do you think that's inherently a problem? Or is it just, so for example, right? You found a huge gap the marketers don't have, but now you've moved away from, really, I wouldn't even call you a marketing agency at this point. The more I talk to you, the more I would say you're a full suite solution to actually growing a business and scaling a business. So do you think that this is inherently a problem, or is it just a matter of business owners not really understanding what a market? Because that, to me, it sounds like even though they fired you, you did the job of a marketer. You did what you're supposed to do. You brought in leads. Now the sweet part is you figured out the back end of it.
I think that the job of a marketer is not running effective advertising. Right? If you and I were to walk into Coca-Cola or Nike or GE Capital or Procter & Gamble, and we were to say, hey, I'm here for the marketing department and I run really good ads.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We'd get laughed out of the building because the marketers in those settings aren't running ads. They're doing a lot of things, and running ads typically isn't one of them. And so the reason I say I think that so much of small business marketing is misplaced is because so much of small business marketing is frankly influenced by the Yellow Pages in the 1980s, when we had very, very few channels by which you could reach customers. And so it was, well, I'm going to spend money where customers are, and customers are all in one of basically three places: the newspaper, right? Traditional media. So by that I mean newspaper, radio. They're in direct mail, so I'm getting in their physical inbox, or I'm in the book. Those are the three places you could be. Right? And obviously there's billboards and other things, but I put all that under traditional media. Outside of that was all there was. And so as you started to really think about, well, how many places are there now? I would say in many ways there's thousands of places. And it's really easy to be in the wrong place. And frankly, growing a book of business, growing gross, is not the same as growing a business. Right? Like how many businesses have you worked with and I worked with over the years that are growing on a gross basis but losing on a net?
It's something that's not talked about. Like when you see, like obviously I'm in the online space a lot, and everyone touts the gross revenue. So it's like, I made X amount. They show the Stripe account. Here's the gross. No one ever taught. It wasn't until recently, and even for myself, by the way, that I started thinking more about, because the one thing that I realized is that I had a pretty successful solopreneur-ish kind of, I had like one or two consultants underneath me, but like we made a bunch of money gross. But then when I looked at the end of the day, it was like, well, I'm not making money. What is going on? And it was only until then I was like, oh, I'm doing this wrong. I was so focused on the gross because externally, that was the big thing.
Yep.
It was like, look how much money, it was a flex, but then your life doesn't change. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm doing this completely wrong. And oddly enough, it wasn't until a guy named Justin Welsh, have you heard of him before? So he's a big solopreneur advocate, sells courses, has like $4+ million, or not $1 million, 4+ million people on his newsletter. And I think it was like $1.7 million he made as a solopreneur. And it was like all profit. And it wasn't until people like him that I'm like, wait a minute, I think I'm doing this wrong. Like, that's not what it was meant to do. And so coming in and saying, all right, well, what is the lifetime value of a customer? What exactly is your actual net? So, you can take a look at, I think one of the things that I like about your approach, and every time we talk, is furthering that conversation of like, okay, well, what does it really cost to acquire this customer? And is that worth it? Because leads are not all the same across the board. And by the way, for 2 seconds, I'm going to run off screen. You can keep talking. I got to close my door. My son came in. I don't know if you saw him. He came in a second ago, and he was like, Dad, he's like trying to figure out Super Mario Brothers. I'm like, bro, I told you I've had an interview. Hold on a second.
Yeah, you're good. No, but you're spot on, man. Here's the thing. When you start thinking about acquisition cost, like for a while there, acquisition cost to me was the holy grail. Mm-hmm. Right? The problem is acquisition cost without COGS, cost of goods sold, doesn't mean a whole lot. You can have a great acquisition cost, but if your cost of goods is out of control in comparison to what you're charging, it doesn't matter. And so I get accused a lot of being a business coach, and I'm not. I'm not a business coach. I don't know enough to be a business coach. Okay, I've not won enough in business to be a business coach. Right? I'm Kellen Moore for all intents and purposes. Right? Like, you can call me a coach, but I've not won jack. And I think about this all the time, where I'm like, okay, as we're looking at how the business is it structured in a way that can make money? Do we have our accounting structured so we actually know if we're making money? And 9 times out of 10, they don't. And again, this is personal opinion that I believe I could support if you forced me to. The average marketer doesn't give a damn. I got a proposal for a nonprofit I'm on the board of, and I'm sitting there with this marketing team that's offering to like put the founder on these podcasts and all this stuff. And I asked them, well, what do you expect us to make from this investment? And the number 2 there basically says, well, that's not our business. And I start lecturing them on this sales call. You just told me, the prospect, essentially you're going to do what you do, and whether or not it's effective, whether or not this nonprofit grows, whether this nonprofit gets the outcome it's trying to invest in, doesn't matter to you. They literally said it on a sales call. That's how brazen marketers are. They don't care. And that's the issue that I have, is it's not just ignorance. Like, I can understand ignorance. We can educate ourselves out of ignorance, but we can't educate ourselves out of not caring. And until I think we as an industry say, what I care about is your bottom line, we're never going to get great results. And
it definitely muddies the market, because I'm technically in marketing. It's funny, I'm in the same kind of boat as you with the business coaching thing, where it's like, I don't really tout myself as a marketer. I'm more of a salesperson that had to learn marketing, and then as a result, I kind of started talking about marketing and whatever. As I jokingly say a lot, like, I'm not a coach, I just coach a lot.
Yeah.
Shout out to Big Pun. But like, the funny thing about marketing is, I think if we're a little bit more clear about what we produce and the reasoning for it, you can probably get away with a little bit more. But today, I mean, marketing as a whole in a lot of different spaces have like kind of a negative connotation to it. But I'm super clear. I actually was just talking to somebody who came to me, and his whole problem was time, was not money. And by the way, this is the space I like to be in. He's a part of the company called, or a mastermind called Genius Network. So I'm talking to him, and he was like, oh, well, tell me about your social media. I have a social media agency. And I was abundantly clear talking about getting on podcasts and all that. I go, look, I'm the ugly girlfriend you get with before you get to the really hot wife. Meaning that, like, at the end of the day, you don't have time, but you value the idea of having a personal brand. You're not paying me to have a bunch of results and views and have the content look amazing. You're paying me because you don't have time. And I'll take an hour of your time, and I'm going to produce a month worth of content. And so the reason I started saying that to people was because I started getting lumped into, well, you're going to give me a bunch of views, which then is going to give me a bunch of, and what I've noticed is that doesn't correlate.
Yeah.
There's a strategy that I follow on the social media side that does result in the leads, But the problem is, like, at the end of the day, like, then you can have leads and then you don't have views and people get mad at me. So I just started saying, like, look, I'm just going to give you your time back and you're going to have a thing done. I'm one of those people that probably be on the call being like, I'm not guaranteeing any results. The result I give you is that you give me an hour, I give you 30 pieces of content. But what marketers do, and by the way, I probably done this in the past as well, is we let's talk about social media. I know it's a little bit different than the traditional marketing agencies, but like small social media marketing agencies, we do this thing where we go, no, you're going to have all these leads, you're going to have all this to make the sale. But then when they don't get this result, they get pissed. Customers I typically bring on when I give this speech, the ugly girlfriend speech as I call it, they tend to not leave because they know what they're getting, right? Yeah. Like I'm abundantly clear about it.
Yeah.
But the people that when I do bring on and they don't understand that, those are the customers that tend to be upset. And so I don't think inherently it's bad for marketing agencies to kind of do what that person did, but at least it's clear to you as the person buying, like, well, that's not what we're looking for. Because I know a good friend of mine, his name's Devin Rodriguez, smart dude, gets people on podcasts. His whole thing is lead generation.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're going to go on the biggest podcast possible and look how many leads you're going to get. That's that's a way better agency to go with than like hey, we're just going to get you on a podcast. Because the truth is there's platforms now you can go on to get on a podcast.
Yeah. So this is, I don't think what you're doing is a bad thing, by the way. Like I post, we have a staff videographer, and about every 6 weeks or so, I spend an entire day filming. And he then cuts all the stuff that we film, and it's posted in like daily shorts on YouTube and on LinkedIn, etc. My purpose in that is not lead generation.
Yeah, exactly.
My purpose in that is authentication. Like, if you want to know whether or not I know my stuff, go watch what I've said, right? Like we're not BSing, we're not messing around. I'll get to the actual facts, and I'll get to it quickly. And I'll give you a real answer. That's what it's there for. So you know what you're getting when you come to us. And I think that that's an important thing to have. But if you confuse that and say, yeah, hey, we're going to post a video every day, and you're going to get 150 people watching it every day, and you're going to have so many leads because you've got 150 people watching it every day, well, then you'd be disappointed. But like you've said, your job is to give them their time back. Like, it's not to generate leads. And I think that's fine. I think that that's like serving an actual need that they have. My job or my need in posting those videos is not lead gen. It's authentication after I've done the lead gen. You know what I'm saying? Like we have to have that too, and that is an important purpose of marketing, right? Like, we've written multiple books, and those are our marketing tools. Very few, like to a degree, some people come to us because of the book, but most often they're coming back to us after we've done the lead gen and saying, hey, I read this book, I'm interested in talking more.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because again,
or like, I didn't even know you did X, Y, and Z.
Right. Yeah. And so I think there are various aspects of the nature of marketing, because marketing is a spectrum from lead gen to pure branding.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, the way you and I market our business is not how Taco Bell markets, right? And even within branding, like, really think about this. Taco Bell does not really do direct response, okay? But their form of branding is not the same as Balenciaga. They're doing branding, but in very different ways. And so understanding, like, well, what is the goal of this marketing and what is its job, I think is a really critical task. But again, I see too many agencies who are saying we're direct response lead gen when they are PR.
So, like, one of your pieces of advice, I feel like, and I want to kind of dive into this a little bit, because you've grown a successful agency and you're continuing to grow. Like, right before we hit record, you're doing some partnerships and growing that. Is part of the lessons that you learned was the importance of knowing who you are and what problems you actually solve. Like, I know it sounds like kind of square one, but at the end of the day, it sounds like if agencies aren't growing, maybe that's a good place to start. What other piece of advice would you have in growing an agency?
The average agency nets out 6 to 12% on an annual basis. I don't know if what that means to you, but the average retail shop nets 20%. What that means, like if you're talking 6% net at the end of the day, you're talking about Kroger, right? You're talking about Walmart. Like, those are the kinds of companies that can live off of 6%.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking McDonald's, right? That are serving 1 billion hamburgers a day. They can live off of 6%. The number one key from my perspective in growing an agency is you have to have a means to generate high volumes of net profit. And I'm talking about netting in the 50, 60, 70, 80% range. And that only comes through high-end consulting.
So less on the done for you.
It's not the done for you. It is high-end. I'm working through the biggest problems that this company has, and we're thinking through, and we are a conduit to you solving the problem. And sometimes that's an idea that I have. Sometimes that's just a discussion that we have.
Mm-hmm.
We have an entire book that we wrote, this one, called Start With Strategy, that basically outlines our methodology for doing that for agencies. And it's not overly complex. I feel like it's relatively obvious. I don't think we've not reinvented the wheel. We've taken concepts that are out there and have been out there for more than 150 years, and we've written them down. That's all that's really happened.
Mm-hmm.
That said, most agencies have a 300% churn rate. That's the national average right now.
Mm-hmm.
Really think about this with me for a second. If I came to you and I said, "Hey Ray, let's build a business model where you have to replace your entire client base 3 times a year and you're going to make 6% off of that," you'd be like, "Bro, that sounds stupid." And I think that's the thing. As an agency, the model of I'm mimicking what the Yellow Pages did in the 80s doesn't work. Right? I worked for a large 650-man agency. They had a 350-man sales team. They were doing $300 million a year. They could live off of 6%.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the owner literally bought a plane, took $1 million a month, and did whatever he wanted. Because he was, a $30 million or $300 million company running 6%, and maybe even less than that. Right? But that's not my company. That's not your company. That's not the average marketer by any means. I think that's the thing. And so as I think about this and how this applies to small businesses, it's the same. Like, you have to know your numbers, not for the sake of knowing your numbers, not because you're going on Shark Tank, but because if you don't know your numbers, it's really hard to impact. I'm not saying, hey, let's do high-end accounting for the sake of doing high-end accounting. I'm saying let's do it because we need to understand where are we actually spending money and how do we retain more profit? And how do I build an organization that month over month over month, year over year over year, is actually generating more net profit? And I think that in a weird way, as marketing transforms into revenue operations, and that shift is already well underway, as that continues to occur, marketers have more and more and more of an opportunity to sit in that seat and say, look, how is it that we can actually build the revenue of this business, gross and net, not simply I provide leads, I provide ads, I provide views, I provide clicks, I provide impressions. Right. This is one other thing. Have you read the book Ad Scam?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so Ad Spam is this book that was written several years ago, and it's a study of banner-based clicks. So like Facebook ads, banners on top of websites, Google Display Network, etc., etc. And the conclusion of this book is essentially that 70% of clicks are fraudulent. There are companies out there like ClickCease that on the advertising side you can put into place, and you can see just how much spam there really is.
Mm-hmm.
It's massive. We had a business that was spending $20,000 a month on ads that we owned. I put ClickCease into place. Our team, and myself, oversaw the ads. So it wasn't like, hey, let's run some ads, let's have somebody do it. No, I ran them. I saw the numbers. We put ClickCease in, and we literally found within 6 weeks that we were wasting $4,000 to $5,000 a month on.
Mm-hmm.
Really think about that. We have and this is one of my reasons for being a little bit more anti-digital. If you can assume with me, let's say on the low end, a third of all clicks that come from digital, of all money spent on digital, is completely wasted, is going to how would that impact how we're selecting channel and understanding what our actual cost structure is going to be? Massively, right? Because now suddenly hey, at least if I'm sending direct mail, I know I've got a 97% delivery because I'm using verified addresses only. I can never have that with digital. Like this is the other thing. So we used a company some time ago. We were testing out geofencing. And so I geofenced my own home and I ran an ad campaign and I spent $100. Guess how many times I saw the ad? Not once. In my, like, targeting just my home, running the ad to myself. I never saw it. And so part of my concern as a marketer, as an agency owner, as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur is how do we make sure we're not being taken advantage of? How do we make sure we're actually getting the results that we want to get? And how do we make sure that we're getting the impact for the money that we're laying out? You know, like, I think that really matters. And I really struggle with the typical ad agency that says, well, results don't matter to me. Because you've got guys who are investing, you know, a family vacation with you. You've got guys investing a new car with you or a down payment on a new house with you, and they're getting nothing. For me, that just feels like not where I want to be operating.
So then, if we're a lot of people listening to this are coaches, consultants, this main kind of group that follows me for whatever reason. And so I know that you've given some thought to this, considering you're transitioning, or you're also, in addition to the agency stuff, you're doing a lot of consulting.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about ways to acquire high quality leads, and put the emphasis on that, so that way we're not just sinking money into stuff that just brings in whoever, or bots for that matter. What are some channels that you've been thinking about in growing your own consulting?
The number one channel that I have seen is live events to a book. You get up in front of an audience. That could be a digital audience. That could be a physical audience. I don't care. And you speak and you show that you know what you're talking about. And at the end you say, hey, if you like what you heard, download my book. You lead capture that into your CRM. You follow up with it with your sales process, right? This is going to sound probably not shocking to you, but shocking to a lot of people. Pick up the phone and cold call somebody. If you don't know how, there's a great book that I would highly recommend. It's called Cold Calling Sucks, and that's why it works. And you know what? As a guy who's cold called a lot, cold calling sucks, but it works. And so I think that there are a number of really good channels that are out there. And this isn't to discount Facebook. This isn't to discount Google. Those can be very good channels. Again, depending on the nature of what it is that you do. But if you're a coach, you're a consultant, you're working with others, I think that there's a lot of value in things like YouTube, and things like, well, used to be TikTok. That's probably going away now, right? But there are channels where you can display your expertise, and that is a great lever that we have seen work for ourselves. We've seen work for others. We've seen it be scalable, large and small. I know people who are selling literally thousands and thousands of people a year selling from stage by speaking, right? I know some of these guys too, right? Like, this isn't a hidden secret. Like, get in front of your audience and talk to them. And don't talk to them in like well, let me give you the what and not the how. This is what I've said to so many people. You give them the what, how, and why. Give them everything. Right? I used to be so afraid people would steal our stuff. And to a degree, I still worry about some of our intellectual property being taken, because I think there is some intellectual property that we've developed that is really unique and is really good. And honestly, there's a little part of me that just had to say, okay, I'm going to flick a switch and just get over it. Mm-hmm. It's like when you get in the ring and you know you're going to get hit in the face, you just have to decide, okay, this is going to happen and I'm over it already, right? Like, yes, people will take advantage of you. Yes, people are not always going to operate ethically with you. Get over it, because what you're risking is nothing in comparison of what you have to gain.
Yeah, I love the live event to the book, and obviously I have your fortunately when I met you in person, you hooked me up with this one, pair marketing system. But I think that I'm with you in that when we're online and running ads, the problem I've always had with ads, and I will put the caveat on this of like, I've never run ads. One, I never learned the process of doing it myself. And I've only hired 2 people to do it for me. But in both times, I hated the lag of like, well, the system, the algorithm has to learn and all of this. And then even when I was getting leads, when I was looking at how many of those leads were actually opening my emails after that, and it just was low. And I was really frustrated with it compared to how much I was spending on it, right? But then I looked at what I was doing for me. Now, I don't know if you would lump this in, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you would lump this in with digital, but then when I was, at the time, Clubhouse was really popular. I don't know if you remember Clubhouse. I would give one-on-one in front of a bunch of people, advice. Here's what I think you should do. Da, da, da. Those leads converted.
Yeah.
Right. When I would do lives or when I'm DMing someone back and forth, like the digital version of cold calling is the cold DM, and I'm giving advice in the DMs, those leads converted and they engage pretty heavily. And so I understand the live to book transition actually work really well, and especially when talking about like cost of acquisition. The only thing I want to challenge you / ask you about is the cold calling part. Because the cold call part, when we're talking about like, cost of acquisition, it doesn't cost you anything to cold call. It does cost you time though. And so a lot of us are cold calling maybe the wrong people or what have you. So what have you found that has worked for you to do the cold call, but it's not eating up a bunch of time?
Nothing. There is no substitute for time in cold calling. And here's the deal. Cold calling is one of the most expensive marketing channels I use. Like, let's just get real for a second. Yeah, you could open up Google and type in electricians near me and start cold calling.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You could. Like, you could theoretically do that. I don't know anyone who does. Right? Like, getting a list to cold call off of that is relatively qualified is expensive. Right? Discover.org, ZoomInfo, my $18,000 a year. That's not, like, call me crazy. That's not cheap. Like 18 grand a year is an expensive proposition. Right? So when I talk about, hey, we're going to cold call and we're going to leverage this as a channel, yeah, it's time consuming. Yeah, it's expensive. I don't know any other way for you to say, hey, Ken, I want to go reach Fortune 5,000 CFOs who have recently gone through an acquisition. I don't know how else you do that other than getting the data and calling those people. And again, maybe that's lack of imagination on my part, but I think that we overlook cold calling, even though it is a great tool, because again, it's scary, it's hard, it's lonely, it's emotionally damaging, right? We have a couple guys on our team who cold call, and one of them, like last week, we had 2 appointments, like 2 qualified appointments that in all likelihood, I believe at least one of those will turn into a sale in the next 30 days. And I'm not talking a small sale. I'm talking $30,000 to $50,000, maybe $60,000 sale.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a cold call. And I said to the guy, who's a very experienced cold caller, I said, what? You're telling me that you cold called all week and nobody reached through the phone and punched you in the face? Like, that's no fun. And we had a good laugh about it because we've all been told that, right? As professional cold callers, like, no one's going to reach through the phone and choke you through the phone or whatever. Like, they don't. But we have this, like, fight or flight, like, instant fear of, like, I'm calling a stranger. And I think once we can get over that, it is such a powerful channel.
So then since it's so expensive and since it's so time consuming, I'm assuming because of like you selling such a high ticket item that it's still worth the squeeze at the end of the day.
Yeah. Honestly, it may be even better than speaking. Like, realistically, speaking is expensive too, right? Like, you've got to generate a presentation. That presentation has to look good. You have to fly somewhere. You have to talk. You have to actually know what the heck you're talking about. You have to have a follow-up. Like, that is an expensive proposition. Speaking is not just that was easy. Writing one of these, like, call me crazy. This wasn't easy, right? This was time consuming. Publishing this, like that was difficult. Getting the book that you have, we just published it on Audible, right? Getting it narrated, like, that wasn't easy. Nothing in business is easy. Nothing. And there's nothing harder than failure and nothing easier than success. Like, I think that's just what it is. Like, yeah, it's expensive, it's hard, it's time consuming, it's not fun, and being broke is worse than all of that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Pick your poison. I'd rather be in control. I'd rather have a say. I'd rather have a vote. I'd rather be able to influence people than just, well, we get what we get.
Yeah.
I hope someone this week.
I think I talked to you about this when we met, that despite the fact that I've always done sales, I've been relatively successful in it, I hate sales. And cold calling to me is like a hard no. However, the one thing that I have found that does work, which you could argue it's cold calling, is the, hey, you downloaded a lead magnet, so I'm gonna call you and see how it helped you, right? Like that one little thing, whenever I recommend that to someone, how many people look at me like I'm crazy, even though it's not like they reached out, they downloaded something from you. All you're doing is just calling and being like, hey man, I'm checking in. How did that lead magnet? Because most people download lead magnets, they don't use them. I want to make sure you use this thing because I spent a lot of time on it. I know it could help you. Talk to me about why you downloaded it. And you couple that with good branding, right? So your content, think about the funnel, right? Your content generated the lead magnet download. The lead magnet download, now you're calling them and checking in about it. And you'd be surprised how many people are like, I don't even want to do that. And I'm like, bro, I promise you, it feels like cold calling. But they gave you a number and they downloaded something. And you could argue the conversation's cold, but at least you're starting with, hey, how did it go?
So when I speak, we regularly give out a lead magnet. Again, it's typically a book. I call myself and follow up with these. And now some of my staff is doing it, but I by and large for a long time have followed up. I've had more people say, wait, you're the guy who wrote the book and you're taking time out of your day to call me?
Right. Yep.
And you want to talk about my business and how you could help me? Really? I think there's so many people who are so used to nobody caring that in a real sense, you not following up is you saying, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you succeed or fail. I don't care what the outcome is. I just am going to do my thing, and if it works for me, it works for me. I think we can all be a little bit more, dare I say, heart-centered than that. And really say, look, I care about other people's success. And you know, I mean, it was Zig Ziglar who said you can get whatever you want in this world by helping enough other people get what they want. And that's really true.
Well, I also just love the play of, like, again, the value part. Like, my favorite part about it is that conversation of saying, can you download this thing? There's a million people that download these things, they never use them, and I don't want you to be one of them. So have you read it yet? No. Cool. I'm not going to pitch you anything until you read that thing. So I'll call you back in a week. Like, it's just making sure they get value. And at there's so many other, the one thing that, I'm not going to lie, every once in a while I get away from this just because I get lazy and I'm like, there's an easier way. But the one thing I love about it is how many great pieces of feedback that I got from it. Saying, hey, I thought it was too long, or I didn't read it because it seemed way too daunting. And then it turned into, okay, well, I could probably make the lead magnet, or I can make the whatever that offer is way more consumable. So instead of doing, like, for a while, I was doing a 7-day email on how to enroll more with less effort. And I started calling people that downloaded it. And it turns out they're like, well, it's just when I get the email, it's not when I want to work on it. And so I put it away in my inbox and I don't get back to it. And then the next day, and I feel like I'm behind, so I don't go to the next day. So then I was like, what if I just turned it into just a single document that you can get to it whenever? And they're like, that'd be better. So I changed it. I didn't get a sale, but I improved the actual content of it. So again, it's one of those things where, you know, I think people underestimate the value of it, of just pick up the phone and calling somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. 110% more.
So one of the biggest things I want to talk to you about was making the marketing side of small businesses way more simple. So if I were to give you 5 minutes to make it the most simple thing in the world so we can actually grow our businesses, now we'll have the benchmark, right? So we're not just trying to generate a bunch of leads. We are trying to grow net profit so that as owners, we can actually take home some money with some frameworks, with some ideas you can give to us, last but not least, on the making it simple.
So we talk about this a lot in the book that you held up, the Prepared Marketing System, and I'll kind of go through it in brief. The problem with most marketing is that it is occasional, not systematic. And really, really good outcomes come from really good systems that can be modified. And so for me, when I'm talking about what does it take to grow a business, it starts with the commitment to build a system, not just take action. And so, and here's the interesting thing. For most people, they already do this in the other parts of their business outside of sales and marketing, right? Like there's no one who's like, yeah, I do fulfillment and I make these widgets, but I don't really have a way that I make them. I just kind of do it however I feel like that day, right? Yeah, I coach people, but I don't really know what I coach them about. It just kind of happens organically. And I say some stuff. I don't really have a framework or a method or training that I'm following. I just kind of talk to people and it works, I guess. Like nobody says that. That's not how they operate. They have a system, they have a process. Now, it may not be formally documented, but it probably should be. And in the same way, when you think about marketing, especially for folks who are getting past the solopreneur, my perspective is that we have to start with two things, and that leads into a third. The first is this. Everything is a system. Everything is a process. There is a way that we do this. How the phone gets answered, how emails get signed. Every interaction with a person is a marketing interaction. We call this our doctrine of total warfare. So I don't know if you've heard the speech. It's a really great speech. If you've not heard it, it's from Winston Churchill. And Churchill is talking in I believe it's 1942. He gives this speech about how the British are going to fight the Germans at all costs. And he gives this line that's just so powerful. He says, we're going to fight them in the air and on the sea, and we're going to fight them in the land and in the valley, and we're going to fight them in the cities and in the villages, and we're going to fight them in the countryside, and we're going to fight them everywhere, is really his message. We're going to fight until we can no longer fight. And that's what they did, is they waged war, land, air, sea, all of it. There was no quarter given. There was no aspect that they did not fight in. Every employee that you have, every team member that you have, every interaction that you have, every piece of software you have is a marketing tool. And so when I say there has to be a system, what I'm saying is you've got to use all this stuff. You've got 10 employees, you've got 10 people who are ready to be activated as marketers, who are ready to go to war for you. You've got to make sure they've got direction. That's piece one. Piece two. You must obsess about acquisition cost. You need to know to the penny, what do I need to spend to get a new customer here? If you say to me, well, Ken, I only speak at events. Great. Let's figure out what does it cost for you to speak at an event. Hey, Ken, I grow my business through networking. Great. What does it cost for you to go networking? If it weren't you doing it, what would it cost? What would an employee get paid? What are all the costs associated? Right? What's the cost of follow-up? What do we actually have to pay to do this? If you don't know what you're investing to get a customer, it's impossible to know what's working and what's not. And so often, like literally, man, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies I've walked in the door and I've asked, well, what gets customers here? I don't know. We get a lot of word of mouth, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You guess? Like you're talking about how your children are going to eat next month, and we're talking about, I guess? No, we have to know. And where this comes from and why I say this and why I harp on this, and I've harped on this for years, is because fundamentally I believe that business is about control. Okay, and I know that sounds like a little, I don't know, off-putting to modern ears, maybe a little bit. Fundamentally, your job as the leader of the organization is to be in control of your domain, right? Survey your land and control it. You're the king, right? If you don't control it, others will control it for you, and you probably aren't going to like what they're going to do with it. And so I think that's the other big thing here is we have to know our numbers. We have to activate our entire team in order to get there. All of that is done through a single lens from my perspective, which is a customer first lens. What I mean by that is this. I'm not asking, do I like this logo? Do I like this website? Do I like this one sheet? I'm asking, will my ideal customer, will the person who I want to work with like this? Right? I've had so many people tell me, well, Ken, I don't really like how this is worded. It's really overly simplistic. Yeah, so is your customer. Mm-hmm. They have no idea what the heck you're talking about. So I'm not going to write something highfalutin for somebody who doesn't understand. Like, imagine that you went into the mechanics shop and they're using all of the technical terms for engine parts. How would you feel? Confused, lost, battered around, unsure as to whether or not they're being honest with you? It's the same thing in every industry. We've got to make it so that our customers feel heard and seen and related to. And so everything that we do has to be asking, how will they perceive this? And if you don't know, ask them. Those are the things, and I know that a lot of people are like, Ken, well, just tell me to run this ad campaign or that ad campaign, or or advertise here or there, do these things. I've never seen that as a blanket means grow organizations. It's these things, it's the bedrock principles that you can build on in so many ways that can work. And that's the key here, is if you get this stuff right, whether you want to do ads or cold call or do events or have an outside sales team or do engineering as marketing or any number of other things, they can all work because they're done through a customer-centric lens. And you've got a team who's enabled and activated to serve people well. That's the key to great marketing.
Well, you definitely given the interesting part is, even though you didn't say like a statement of, hey, this is what you need to do to grow your business, the questions that you kind of asked, it even got me kind of thinking, because the one thing I tend to do, which is probably like a lot of people like me, I'm very highly creative, and every 2 days I have a new idea. But the one thing that I miss, which you just reminded me of, so thank you for that, is going back to the basics of like, okay, well, who am I making this for? Where I tend to skip that part because I'm like, well, I've done this before, and I know people want this, so I'm going to make it. Or I just want to make it. And then it's just a matter of like finding the people that want to do it. But I think it is incredibly helpful to start with the perspective, like, is, who is this for? Who's even going to read this, and kind of going from there, and then kind of building, and then also making sure we communicate with people. Ken, my guy, thank you for coming to the podcast. We'll bring you back on, because I want to have a conversation, and maybe this will be a three-person podcast. There's a guy that I know, branding expert, and I want to talk about the difference between branding and marketing a bit. So we'll probably bring you on for that conversation, because, to me, one of the things that I realized later on was I think everything is a branding problem, not a marketing problem. And to me, it's like the foundation now of everything that I'm doing is thinking about the brand of, I went from Elevated Sales Academy to Raylen Davis. And when I made that transition, things got a lot easier. And it could arguably because of the world of, again, I'm predominantly online, and my personal brand is the business, which, I'm sure later on in life will pose different problems. But anyway, we'll do that later. Dude, any final thoughts you want to leave people with before we jump out of here?
I'd love for folks, if they've enjoyed this conversation, we make the Prepared Marketing System book available at no cost. You can go to thepreparedgroup.com/book, and you can grab a copy there. It's also available on Amazon if you want a hard copy. It's available on Audible if you want the audiobook version. But I would love for folks to grab that and shoot me over their feedback and just tell me, hey, this worked, this didn't work, I've got questions. Like, we want to see people win in life and in business.
Perfect. I'll leave it in the description below as well for those that are listening to this. And as always, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks, guys.